Welcome into the Illinicast. Austin Berkland alongside Sonny Verma, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about all things Illini football signing day, the strategies laid in part by the staff of Brett Bielema, and a little bit of Illini basketball talk at the end. But I want to welcome my co-host Sonny Verma. Sonny, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. I woke up in a decent mood, and post signing day, I think I'm in a little bit better mood. How about you, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of year because you look at just the straight recruiting rankings, and Illinois is 14th out of the new 18 team Big Ten. But you got to be happy that Brett Bielema is still raising the bar of recruiting over and over and over again. So that's always good to see. But you do wonder, are you keeping up with the Joneses truly? So that's a conversation I know we'll have in this podcast. But overall, doing well. I mean, the holidays are coming up rather quickly, and got all my Christmas shopping done, and just ready to hang out, be with family, and eat some sugar cookies that my mom made.
Yeah, I think I'm going to my in-laws for Christmas, and when those Christmas gifts are opened up, I'll be just as surprised as everyone else as what's in those boxes because my wife does all the shopping and she just uses a credit card. So it'll be a Christmas surprise for all of us.
Hey, that's always good. Surprises are what the season is all about. And I'll tell you what, Brett Bielema got us a surprise with the Michigan State offensive lineman. How about that?
Not just one, two surprises. Um, what's his name? J.C. Davis, the one that
Yeah.
had committed earlier, and Wigginton. It's the two lines were kind of the facets of the team that I was kind of most worried about. That along with defensive backs coming into the offseason, and now after all the moves that have been made, at least today, and Brett obviously during his press conference said that there's more to come. I think I'm kind of content on with both sides of the ball when it comes to the lines now. I think, I was super nervous. We saw how bad our team can be in the first 4 or 5 games last year without having someone at that left tackle spot. And now having Davis come in and play that left tackle spot, it's something we don't have to worry about. He's a Mountain West All American. He was like graded number 22 tackle in the country or something like that. It's nice. It's good, because Luke is going to need that time. We'll talk about it later, but our offense, obviously we haven't talked about the other big news about Isaiah Williams leaving, but our offense, at least at the skill position, still, I think I'm more confident about than the defensive side. So, it's going to be interesting. But the one thing I'm glad that I don't think I have to worry as much about right now is our offensive line coming into next season.
Yeah, I mean Wigginton, and then the new again, then the other offensive lineman coming in. I mean, that is a great duo for some quick development for Brett Bielema. And then on the opposite side of the ball, in terms of transfers, Anthony Johnson coming in from Youngstown State, and I know we lost Quincy Patterson, the commit out of Yale, after the
Clay
official
Patterson.
visit. Clay Patterson, yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mhm.
Clay Patterson leaving, that was a little jarring to see, but knowing that you have another defensive lineman in Anthony Johnson, the transfer market has gone better this year than I think it has than last year.
Well, we hope so. We kind of struck out on basically all everyone we tried for the transfer market last year. So, um, you know, I think what we've done this year is went less after raw prospects and went after guys who were established. Uh, what's his name? Who you just said? Anthony Johnson.
Yep.
He was established. Who's the guy who just led country in sacks?
Oh yeah.
These guys are all guys who um, Mario Williams, second All American in the NGCAA, I think they call it. It's these
Yeah.
guys are proven commodities at that level, and we're just asking them to bump it up a level, as opposed to guys whose traits we saw last year, who had good intangibles, but I don't know. I'm not sure what the decision process was. I guess we decided that maybe we can develop them, but that just doesn't make very much sense because you have less time to develop the transfers. At least with freshmen, you have them for 5 or 6 years. With transfers, you have 2 or 3 years, and so maybe in their second year, they're going to be able to provide a little bit more. But as of now, I think they may have adjusted their strategy, which is all you and I were kind of begging them to do. And at least as of right now, on December 20th, the first signing day open, I'm actually okay with how things are going.
I mean, we have the sacks leader in the JUCO ranks, Daniel Brown. We have the receptions leader of JUCO in Mario Sanders. I mean, that is a great duo of JUCO players that have had a production. We've seen the JUCO ranks fail before under the likes of Tim Beckman, but I feel like this is a different class of JUCO players that you're getting into. You're not getting into the second tier to third tier JUCO ranks. These are the top of the top guys of all of JUCO football. And then you pair them with some great veterans in the transfer portal of Power 5 to Power 5 transfers, or at least Group of 5 to Power 5 transfers. I mean, this is the kind of way that Brett Bielema is going to have to build until he has sustained success. Then you can go after some of the heavy hitters of the transfer portal that the likes of Ohio State and the likes of Michigan can start to get into. I mean, it's these kind of foundational transfers that lead you into the next sphere of the transfer market.
Yeah, and it's just nice that we're getting guys that other people are battling. Last year, a lot of the transfers we're getting, obviously at the end of the Lovey years, were just guys that where we were the only Power Five offers. We're identifying talent, but we're not the only ones identifying it at the level that we're at. Which is why, again, I'm not. I know there's a lot of Debbie Downers out there about our class is ranked either 14th or 15th in the conference, but kind of like what you're saying is I think this is almost a purposeful strategy by Brett. We talked about this a little bit on the last time you and I were together. I think Brett knows that with our NIL availability, that he can't go up against the Oregons, against the Ohio States, the big teams like that. So what can he do? And I think he's just trying to basically discover a market inefficiency and take advantage of it. Right now, he doesn't need to win 10 games next year. He doesn't need to win 11 games next year. What he needs to do, all his fan base really wants at this point, is let's be a consistent bowl team. And if we have good players playing in the positions on the football field, and we can get 6, 7 wins, I think incrementally we can start getting better talent. Because yeah, do we need more 4 stars eventually in our recruiting classes? Absolutely. But I think what he's doing right now, and this is going to be a fool me twice situation. We'll see halfway through the season. But I think using our NIL funds and kind of concentrating it on more established guys, both in the locker room and what seems to be guys from other Power Five programs. Wigginton has 2 years of eligibility left. He started a half a dozen games for Michigan State. I think he's looking for more proven guys with maybe possibly lower ceilings right now, but he'll work on the ceilings a little bit later. He's trying to establish a higher floor for the Illini.
I mean, you look at the overall rankings of this class, Illinois is 43rd in the country. I like to break these down almost in tiers, like, because is there truly a difference between having the number one class and the number two class in the country? Not really, unless you're talking about that special LSU team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the list goes on. Most classes are going to be pretty similar in nature between like different tiers. And you look at who the number 36 team in the country is, the Washington Huskies, who are in the college football playoff right now. Illinois is only a few slots behind them. Similar commitment numbers. Washington has 16, Illinois has 19. So you look at those kind of rankings, there's not too much of a difference. I mean, I think I myself like to haggle about different rankings and things like that. Like, why is FAU ahead of Illinois after FAU lost to Illinois? Those kind of things. But the similar tiers is what keeps me from like jumping off a cliff of this Illini class because you're with some of your fellow counterparts of teams that you should be competing with, like Mississippi State, like Kansas under Lance Leipold, Washington. I mean, it's not like you're way down below Akron and Toledo and different MAC schools of class rankings. So Illinois is kind of in line where they need to be to compete. Now it's up to Brett Bielema to coach these guys up.
I look at it very similar to you, actually, but not really on a national scale, but more on a Big Ten scale. The last 3 years that Lovey was here, we were either last or second to last to Rutgers when it came to, conference recruiting. It's the stat has been going around that Brett has, three top 50 classes in his first 3 years, whereas we barely had any in like the 10 years before that. The way I'm looking at his tiers is when Brett was hired exactly 3 years ago today, actually, um, we were the bottom in the Big Ten when it came to recruiting. And now I guess next year we're going to have 18. So let's just do rough math. If you separate into like fours or fives, right now we're at the top of that fourth tier. Right now our goal just needs to be in that third tier. All
Yep.
right. Right now we're battling the Northwesterns, Purdue, UCLA actually has a worse class than we do. Um, but we're on top of them, and that's
It
why I'm
it's
not
Maryland and Minnesota that you're trying to pass, and
sure.
Rutgers.
Yeah, and I know Iowa's class is not super highly ranked, but it's one of those where I don't think we've fallen behind compared to where we were 3 years ago. If fans, listening to this or, reading on Twitter, if your goal is to, finish 15th in recruiting or 21st in recruiting, we're not that kind of school. At least not yet. It's going to take some time, a lot more money. If this bothers you, sign up for Icon, make your donations, tell your friends. But right now, I think our success is going to be in a slow incremental level. Next year, yeah, let's get into that third tier. And then let's work our way up that third tier because I genuinely feel like we do have the coaching in place to coach the guys up that we have. Unfortunately, we're not bringing that, the high talent in there to get coached up to be in that, 10, 11 win tier yet. But I think just the way we're going, Brett's doing what he was hired to do. Not as quickly as most of us want him to do it, but again, we're at the top of the fourth tier right now. Which again, it's not you would. I can understand your frustration if you're like, "Hey, this is third year. We should be beyond that." But I mean, when he was hired, he got in a lot of trouble for saying that we had zero offensive linemen. Lovey, for all his faults, I mean, yeah, he recruited some gems, Newton, Randolph, Isaiah Williams, but there was zero depth after that. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what we've been suffering through the last couple of years. Now, our floor has been raised. I genuinely believe that. I think, almost every guy that we have is a Power Five talent, which I don't think I would have said four seasons ago. So now that we've raised the floor, it's about developing those guys and slowly raising the floor so that, as you said, we're battling, the Minnesotas and Marylands, and we can kind of leave the Purdue's and Northwesterns behind.
I mean, building a college football roster is very similar to looking at how an MLB organization is built. You look at the Los Angeles Angels. They had Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, never made any noise in the playoffs. If you look at a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, not a lot of star power. They moneyball it, but they get results constantly. And they do it besides the way that Ohio State builds their program. Like that's what Illinois can possibly do under Brett Bielema is constantly just build depth of a team as opposed to insane star power right away. That will come with wins. And I saw a comment on a message board and I thought it was rather interesting. about NIL sponsors for Illinois football. These college of business graduates, they like to buy winners. They love to invest in winning companies, invest in winning people, invest in innovative ideas. Right now, Illinois is not a winner in their eyes. I think if Illinois becomes a winner, these college of business grads will start to flock to them because they see a winner. They see a way that it can build them happiness instead of total money because it's not really how that operates too much. But I think once those wins come in 3 years where they're constantly a bowl game team, I think those college of business people will be like, "Hey, I'm interested in this. How can I help get this to the next level? I've already seen them win. Now I want more." So I think that's kind of how Illinois football is going to have to build is a money ball way with a depth of talent instead of the high end guys. And Lovey Smith, he just tried to get those high end guys like Joshi Mator Bebe or Wole Batiku. Those guys, that was it. Other after that, not a lot of talent on those teams.
Yeah, it's just consistent winning. It's finishing 5-7. You and I both talked about how disappointing that was, even having no bowl game because we're so close. We were on this cusp of folks getting excited about back to back bowl appearances. It's I'm not sure what it's going to take, but right now I just think the 6-6, 7 and fives or whatever it might take. It might just take Luke jumping a level. I did my undergrad at Northern Illinois, and what got folks really excited about, and because I went there during Garrett Wolf's Heisman campaign. NIU is not exactly known as a traditionally, football rabid, fan base by any stretch of the means, but almost every game I went to, the stands were full because everyone wanted to see this little guy, book it for 85 yards and score a touchdown. So, we had Newton, we have Weatherspoon, but it's harder for guys on defense to be that guy. Like, I do wonder if, can Luke Altmaier make that jump and be, considered one of the best quarterbacks in the conference? It may take more than conference. Caden Fagan, I think he has a legit ability, especially with the offensive line that we're kind of building around him, to become a household name. But I think that's what Illinois kind of needs right now, um, in order to get those business grads that you're talking about, um, you know, back into investing in the football program. But I just don't know if it coincides with the strategy that Brett has kind of maneuvered to. It just seems that and I side with Brett. I get what he's where he's going with this. He's not going to out recruit and outspend a lot of the teams already in the conference and that are arriving from the West. So I think he's just like, what, I need to get the best talent in here any way I can get it in here and coach them up. And then sooner, once we're winning 7, 8 games and we're beating our rivals, then we'll be able to the guys that we're battling, this running back that we're battling with against Purdue, we can say, hey, we've beaten Purdue. We've beaten Purdue two times now. Okay, Purdue's still finishing second to last. Ryan Walters may not be around much longer, et cetera, et cetera. That's when we'll be able to push to get a higher level of talent here.
Absolutely. I mean, they've already laid the groundwork against teams like Minnesota. I know Minnesota is ahead of Illinois in the recruiting rankings, but 2 wins over Minnesota is absolutely huge. Or is it, no, it's 3, pardon me. 3 wins against a team in Minnesota. So those kind of wins matter in terms of building up and going into that next tier, like you said, that tier 3 of the Big Ten. Now
And
let's go
not to mention, Minnesota's lost a lot of players this offseason.
right.
There's been a mass exodus out there. So not that I think PJ Fleck's seat is warm by any stretch of the imagination, but at least you can see now that there's a whispers going around. And with a solid 6, 7 wins, maybe 8 win season for us, because the schedule is going to actually allow it. It's there for it to win 6, 7 games if we want to. Um, If we can establish that Brett's, established he's not going anywhere, we're on a path. I think we can take some of the guys that Minnesota's currently taking from us, and kind of basically leapfrog them.
Let's go through some of the biggest gets of this Illini signing day in terms of the freshmen that are coming in next year. We have Khalil Valentine, the running back, interior offensive lineman, Andrew Dennis, Vernon Woodward, the cornerback out of Florida, Eddie Turek out of Illinois, defensive lineman. We have Trey Petty, the quarterback out of Starksville, Mississippi, Angela McCullum out of Ohio, as well as his Ohio mate, Demetrius John. And then we have Easton Baker, the linebacker out of Utah as well. So, what is your number one recruit that Brett Bielema brought in?
I think, mm, I don't want to pick the obvious one in Dennis. Obviously, he's like our highest rated one, so I'm going to try to pick someone who has intangibles. And I'll say, I'll say the quarterback, Trey Petty. Um, just because I also want to talk about the quarterback room. This is probably the best quarterback room we've had in a pretty long time. When it comes to 1, 2, and 3, hopefully Leary can make the leap to become a solid backup quarterback this upcoming season. But Petty with his success the last 2 years. They won the state championship last year. They came up just short this year. He seems to have the kind of tape that Barry Lunny Jr. wants. I think he stays in the long haul because him and Altmaier's family, I've heard, are pretty close. So, I love Luke. We're both very big fans of his, and it'll be nice to not always have to find a transfer quarterback. So I'm kind of hoping, Leary after Altmaier's done, or Petty, as he's could be groomed to being, can be that guy where we can use our NIL funds. You figure most of it goes to a quarterback. We can kind of spread it out to the other positions, and kind of level those positions up. Um, Daniel Brown, of course. Well, he's the community college guy, but trying to think who else. Who else we saw? Baker's film. I don't know if you watched any of that. He just mauls
Yes,
people.
that was my answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it.
I love Easton Baker's tape. I know he's a little undersized, but I watched a lot of Nakobe Dean's Georgia tape after he got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not saying that Easton Baker's going to turn into Nakobe Dean, one of the best linebackers in college football, but the dude plays with an aggression. He's like a missile coming out of his stance to the running back, to the quarterback, or that wide receiver going into the slot. I love his athleticism that he has. I mean, I just feel like he's a guy tailor made to play Big Ten football at the linebacker position. And not to mention the fact that Illinois and Andy Boo beat beat Oklahoma for the talents of Easton. And Oklahoma is a team that loves to scout linebackers. They are a team that knows what they want out of a linebacker. And for Illinois to take that over, that is amazing work by Andy. And I can't wait to see him suit up in the orange and blue.
He's one of those. Yeah, he was recruited by Oklahoma, but if he was 2 inches taller, he would have been recruited by the tier two, tier one guy teams in the Big Ten. So yeah, he isn't as big as Aaron Henry talked about how he wants like 6'3", 6'4" guys, but he has the other intangibles, and so that's why. Yeah, his. I think his is a name that we'll be hearing a couple years from now as one of our prominent defensive standouts, and a lot of other teams are going to be looking around like, who is this guy? How did we miss out on him? Because I mean, I think it's 24/7. Like they had him has rated as one of our lower rated individuals, and I just thought that was mind boggling, at least from the tape that I saw. But then when I was reading a couple scouting reports, a lot said he was a little undersized, and I'm just like, well, again, if he was 6'3", 6'4", he probably wouldn't be signing with Illinois Fighting Illini. So I'll take what I can get, and I think we have the coaching staff to maximize his potential.
And then we can't forget about Andrew Dennis. He is the lead dog, a 92 ranking according to 24/7, 6'5", 275 pounds. He's a guy that almost looks the part where he could play right away. Obviously, he probably won't because he's a freshman, but that's the type of talent that Brett Bielema can constantly bring in because he's just a offensive line guru, and I can't wait to see Brett's tutelage, get a hold of him and really develop him and hopefully turn him into an all Big Ten caliber player.
The other guy who was slipping my mind a couple minutes ago, who actually probably would have been my answer, was Brandon Hanson, the first guy who signed with the Illini 18 months ago. Brett today during his press conference talked about how he's had teams in the college football playoff right now reach out to him, recently to try to flip, but from what I've read, he's been very enthusiastic about being an Illini. Him and Dennis have kind of teamed up, and they've gotten along really, really well. And if those two, I mean, Brandon's 6'6", 290, and he's 18 years old. Imagine, in a couple off seasons with Tank getting a hold of him. Obviously our offensive line that we've been recruiting has already been pretty massive to begin with, but I think he can be kind of that cornerstone in a year or two, along with Dennis, along with some of the other guys we recruited the last couple of years, where we won't necessarily be looking to constantly refill that line with transfer guys. We've been doing it lately because of, again, what we discussed earlier, Lovey not really leaving us much depth and basically stopped recruiting offensive line for a while. But again, that leads to us being able to divert those funds towards other weaknesses that we might have.
Another guy that I'm excited about is Khalil Valentine. I mean, obviously, 4-star, 3-star kind of talent at the running back position, but him and Caden can really form a thunder and lightning approach in the backfield next year, where I think he is probably the most immediate impact player that Illinois got in the recruiting class this year.
And I think it's super important. This is why I'm so satisfied with the two offensive linemen we brought in today. Two what I perceive to be starters on our team. I love our running backs room. As long as those guys can stay healthy, which of course last year they didn't. So I guess that is a question mark. But with Luke, with another year of experience, with a decent offensive line in front of him, it'll be nice to have just running back after running back after running back just to hand the ball to and just kind of wear teams down, because we've talked about the size of our offensive line. Those guys are big maulers. And so, it'll give time for one of the other receivers to try to step up next to Pat Bryant. Just we want some sort of offensive identity. And, we talked about it for the first 6 weeks last season. What is our identity? What is our identity? Khalil Valentine, as you said, kind of gives the yin to the yang of Caden Fagan and can kind of give the offense some different looks. And, we're talking about exciting players earlier to get the crowd excited by. Valentine's one of those players.
Another position that I'm kind of intrigued about this 2024 class is the wide receiver room. You're losing Casey Washington, you're losing Isaiah Williams, but I like Mario Sanders' tape, and I like getting Carlos Orr, who is the second highest rated player in this class. So I think Illinois did a decent job of kind of stocking back up. I think they need like one more piece in the transfer portal, but the likes of Malik Elzy, Carlos Orr, and Mario Sanders, I think that's a decent looking wide receiver room, even compared to what you had last year.
At least if Malik Elzy can make that leap, and kind of establish himself as a starter. If Pat Bryant can get 800 yards, 900 yards as our WR1, and Malik Elzy can step into that number 2 role, I think we've shown enough depth from like last couple of games last year where we have some young guys with talent. Do I wish we had Isaiah Williams back? Absolutely. Like, that's the one guy who's announced. I knew the law firm were going to leave. Newton
Yeah.
absolutely should have, and Randolph, it was 50-50. I could have understood if he decided to stay, but I can totally understand if he wanted to leave. I think Isaiah Williams, if he were to stay, would have like raised our ceiling by at least a game or two just by himself. Because then I think we'd have a great wide receiver room and running backs and a good quarterback and now good offensive line. We'd have a very top half best offensive line in our conference at minimum. Obviously, he's gone, so we're going to be counting on that development of that wide receiver room a little bit. So yeah, bringing in uh, second All American, I think he was. It's nice to have a couple of guys. It's just I don't want to. It's at least they're established. I just hope we get more out of them this year, unlike what we didn't get last year.
Offensively, though, a huge hole that still leaves a lot to be desired is the tight end room. They've struggled in the transfer portal, snagging a couple guys. Tip Ryman is headed to the NFL, and Carson Conkle in Illinois just didn't see eye to eye. All you have is Tanner Hollinger coming into a tight end room with Henry Boyer probably leading the charge right now. So a lot to be desired from this tight end room, and I don't really understand why that hole is the hardest to fill right now. It's almost like the John Gross point guard, where he has a great history of point guards, but why can't he fill it at Illinois? Brett Bielema has a great history of tight ends. Why can't he fill it at Illinois? So it's a really weird situation why that position has become a big hole for the Illini.
I agree. I think that's probably my second biggest area of concern right now behind defensive back. I I think when Brett said that they still plan on bringing in more guys, I think that's kind of what he meant. Um, there's going to be other guys, possibly this week who are going to enter the transfer portal, or at the very least, after the spring game when that second window opens, that are going to realize that they're not at the depth chart that they want to be at, and they're going to kind of focus in on the position then. But I agree, it befuddles me. I don't quite understand. Like, if I'm a tight end, Brett is absolutely one of the coaches I would love to play for. Just I look at Tip Ryman's story. He's a walk on. He's a
Yep.
walk on. Now, just a couple years later, he's developed under this coaching staff to the point where he's even able to announce for the NFL draft. Now, for me, I don't understand why a 3-4 star guy who has the physical size traits doesn't see a story like that and be like, yeah, I want to be coached under that guy. So, kind of perplexes me too.
What would you give Brett Bielema and his staff? What grade would you give him and his staff for the class? And I know the transfer story isn't over yet, but so far, what would you give him before the final exam? I know when we're in past semester exam time. So, what would be that grade before the final exam?
I think we're at like an 83%. Two of my biggest concerns, as I was saying earlier, are taken care of. So I don't think it's going to fall below a B or B minus, but it's not an A yet because I'm still worried about who we're going to have in our secondary. It's not. We haven't recruited the high end, the 4 5. I won't even consider the 5 stars yet, but the multiple 4 stars yet. So again, it's hard for me to give an A, but I think with the way the team looked like coming into the offseason, I had legit concerns that the floor of this team was like 3 wins next year. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think we're you know probably a 4-5 win team, and that's just because of the less concern I have on the two sides of the ball when it comes to the lines. But now we have an opportunity to increase that if we fix that secondary, and the big question I'm sure we're going to talk about this offseason is like, what adjustments does that defense make? Like, what does Brett and Aaron Henry talked about in their closeout press conferences how they think the teams have figured their defenses out. All right, so what does that mean? What kind of adjustments are going to be made? are there going to be adjustments made? And so, if Henry can kind of continue up, on his trajectory as a defensive coordinator, and we can bring in some talent in the secondary, I think we can hit 6, 7 wins next year. Again, with that schedule, especially I don't know if you heard the rumor about us trying to get out of that Kansas game. If we can hit six,
Uh,
7 wins, I think
I think that Kansas game is sticking around because Illinois did release a comment that said there's no changes to the schedule.
yeah, but the Kansas guy responded to that. I don't know if you saw. He's like, I've seen absolute official documentation of Kansas reaching out to other teams for that particular date. They're just not announcing it because they haven't found the buy-in game yet. So I mean, I don't know. We'll see. What do you think? Like, would you get out of the game?
I mean, I wouldn't. I think it sets a bad precedent. I think if you just set the schedule with cupcakes, then that's fine. You're Michigan. That's how you schedule. It's not like Michigan has ever like bought out a game against Texas or anything to get a cupcake on their schedule. So I would leave it just out of pure competitiveness, especially with a team that you might be competing with a lot of recruits for. You don't want to seem chicken against playing tough competition for in the short term, but in the long term, just keep scheduling cupcakes. So I think this is a short term need to keep that game.
I think the short-term need is to make a bowl game, and if we didn't play Kansas this year and played Western Kentucky instead, we'd be talking about which bowl game we're going to right now. And, the general tone around the program would be a little higher, talking about back to back bowl games. So for me, like, I think Kansas was the third game that we had next year, but then it becomes a gauntlet. Like there's like Nebraska, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, like back to back to back. And the idea that at some point in the season we could be like 1-4 or 2-5, I just think we're going to run into the same thing that happened this year. So for me, it's not about pride anymore. Michigan, they can back out of these deals if they want because they're going to win 10 games every year anyway. Their interest is not going to wane. We're at the bottom level. We need those bowl games. Every win matters. Just get to 6. So if I'm Josh, get out of that Kansas game, get out of that Missouri game. We'll see how Duke is now that their coach left. But yeah, just give me 3 cupcakes. It's just until we establish ourselves beyond what we are.
I definitely see that. But yeah, the Big Ten getting better in a lot of areas. I mean, I just want to hit on one team in particular, and that's the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I mean, flipping Rayola from Georgia. I mean, Matt Rule has got it going on right now. He is the guy that everyone thought like Luke Fickle would be. I know that Wisconsin has been decent in the recruiting trail, but right now it feels like Nebraska's hot streak is here right now.
And the difference between Matt Rule and other Nebraska coaches who I mean that program traditionally always brings in pretty high ranking classes is Matt Rule. We've seen his coaching abilities. We've seen the jumps his team make in year 2. So Nebraska absolutely is going to be a team that is going to be another thorn in our side, and another team that we play next year. So hopefully, we'll be able to take advantage of a young freshman quarterback. But yeah, they got Rayola, they got the top player out of Iowa, the state of Iowa, which almost is always a Hawkeye, but for 2 years in a row, it won't be. So it's Nebraska looks like that they've been handed the reins, and more importantly, the checkbook to go out there and really do whatever it takes to be battling the Ohio States, the Oregons, and whatnot. So they're recruiting at a different tier than we are. And unfortunately for us, I think they got a good coaching staff out there, except for their offensive coordinator. So I'm actually not that worried about last year. I've never been a fan of what's his name, Satterfield, and
Yep.
I think he's a huge Achilles heel of theirs. But I think in 2025 and beyond, Nebraska is going to be a team to really be afraid of.
Illinois takes on Missouri in the bragging rights game. coming up, I believe that is Friday,
Yep.
the 22nd. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's going to look like if Illinois plays its best game possible. I think that has to start with Marcus Domask because I think we know what Terrence Shannon can do on a nightly basis. He has shown the consistency, minus the second half against Tennessee. If Marcus Domask shows up in the Enterprise Center and just completely dominates like he did against Florida Atlantic, where he's making shots, where he's playing some booty ball, where he's posting some guys up, I think this Missouri team is going to have a lot of problems. I think it starts with Marcus Domask getting going.
I've been very adamant almost every episode that I like this team, but I'm afraid to see who that. Like, I want to see who that second guy is behind Shannon, because as you just said, Shannon has been a complete stud almost all season long. He's made the leap that we asked him for. He's going to be in contention for All American. Um, but now, I mean, if you're talking about back-to-back games where like Quincy Guerrier has had good numbers, Coleman Hawkins had good numbers, Ty Rogers had his best game of the season against Colgate. I'm kind of wondering if my line of thinking was off, that it may not be just a second guy. It might just be a good general supporting staff around Shannon. And so what I'm actually really hoping for is one of those games where, yeah, Shannon might go for 21, 22, but Guerrier puts in 16. Domask puts in 13. Hawkins 8. An all-around game where, it's like you can't just attack Shannon like Tennessee did, because if all the guys are hitting their shots, what does that do for Shannon? That opens up the lanes for Shannon to put his head down and get to the rim. So I think now, just because I don't know if we have a second guy, I kind of like the idea that maybe we're just going to have a bunch of guys who, like 3-4 guys a night, can be able to put up double figures for you. Goody doesn't make mistakes. You don't want Damask to make mistakes. Just play a little isolation ball, booty ball with Damask, whatever it might take. Get Ty Rogers, his confidence up game by game, especially as we're about to head into conference play season. But I think what I'm hoping for is not necessarily a second guy to step up Friday night against Missouri, but just an onslaught. Let's just finally really grab their throats and take this series back. Let's win by 20 plus points. We should. Talent wise, we should. Talent and coaching wise, I think we're clearly better than they are. But unfortunately for us, that's been the case for the last few years too. And talent, just it doesn't matter in this series. You throw it out the window. So yeah, what I'm looking forward to is just, we have veteran leadership in this game. Last year, we had a bunch of freshmen in prominent roles coming into this game, and that atmosphere can get pretty, intimidating, pretty crazy. I think what makes me more confident about this year's team as opposed to last year's team is because we have veterans in those roles, guys who've been in intense situations, that they're not going to back down. And so I think Missouri is kind of Tennessee, and okay, so Marquette, Tennessee were, the first opportunities. Actually, FAU, we've actually done pretty well with that the more I think
Yep.
about it. So the fact that we've established that we're not going to crumble under the spotlights, whether it's Madison Square Garden or going up against a, top 10 team, I think I just want to see it continue, because I think if we have a really, really good, satisfying win Friday night, that sets us up really well for Big Ten season.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that second guy. It almost feels like one of those Miami Heat teams with Jimmy Butler, where you obviously know who the alpha is. It's Terrence Shannon Jr. And if Jimmy Butler or Terrence Shannon Jr. Struggle, the Miami Heat and the Fighting Illini are probably losing that game. But how the Miami Heat have been so successful is one night it's Duncan Robinson, one night it's Bam Adebayo,
Mhm.
one night it's Tyler Hero, and it's pretty similar to this Illini team with Quincy Guerrier, with Coleman Hawkins, with Luke Goody even adding into the mix, and Marcus Damask. I mean, if two of those guys show up against Missouri, Coleman Hawkins and Marcus Damask, Quincy Guerrier and Coleman Hawkins, like the combinations are endless of what guys step up. And then just get that tough perimeter defense by Ty Rodgers. And that's a nightmare situation for a team because not only do you have the human wrecking ball of Terrence Shannon Jr. Plowing down the court, going coast to coast at elite speed, you still have to deal with the shooting ability of Marcus Damask. You still have to deal with Coleman Hawkins' ability to spread the floor out and dribble drive against a slower big man. So the list goes on of how Illinois can be effective in this Missouri game. And I think it's going to take a combination of two of those alongside a standard Terrence Shannon Jr. game.
I think you nailed it. That Miami Heat team, that's not a type of team that's going to make the NBA Finals every single year, but they were just hard to beat. They're difficult to guard, as you said. You just never know who the other guys were to step up, and in the right year, as they did a couple seasons ago, yeah, they can make that run to the finals. This team right now, speaking of Illinois, I don't know if it's got national championship potential, but if they continue to build on the way we've been playing, and a couple bounces here and there go right in March, that's the odds have to favor us at some point. They've been stacked against us a couple years in a row now. So a couple bounces go our way. I can see us. Yeah, you're right. Maybe there has to be Sweet 16 potential. I think that's kind of our goal right now. But one or two extra bounces our way, we can talk Elite Eight, and who knows, Final Four. So I think you nailed it with that comparison.
And one thing that gives me extreme positives of this Illinois basketball team, regardless of the individual efforts, is that they're playing team basketball. They're very fundamentally sound. They play tough. They play together. They rebound the basketball. They play elite perimeter defense. Nothing is ever easy for an opponent. Outside of a weird second half against Tennessee where they didn't rebound, they've been playing great fundamental basketball. And you pair that with good individual performances, that's a winning combination of basketball right there.
And we haven't heard anything about the players not liking each other. They
Right.
seem to really all kind of be unified on the court, having each other's back, being supportive. It's I think that's key. Last year, of course, by now Sky Clark had left. There was grumblings. Jaden Epps in a couple weeks doesn't get off the bench in that Northwestern game. I don't see or foresee something like that happening with this squad here. Some of the freshmen aren't playing right now. I don't think that's going to be an issue, but right now I think Brad Underwood has built a staff or a roster here that is all they know their roles. They know what they're here for. They know, a lot of the guys he brought in are only going to be here for one season, so they want to maximize their time here in Champaign, and they want to make that prominent March run. And so I think that's kind of the goal. Last year we had guys, having press conferences and just going way off tangent, talking about drinking energy drinks here and there. And even the reporters and fans are like, what are you talking about? We don't really have that here. They seem to be pretty focused on what the goal is, and that's Brad Underwood's goal, and that's our goal. And so, this is a much more likable team than last year.
Like we talk about that. Like obviously I like hearing what Brad Underwood has to say, win or loss. But this year, I'm not, like, running to a laptop to see a Brad Underwood press conference even after the Marquette and Tennessee losses because there wasn't anything outstanding where I was like, "Oh my god, I need to hear what Brad Underwood has to say about A, B, and C." It's just, we didn't rebound. Tyler Kolek is a great basketball player. I mean, that's, like, pretty much it, and that is so refreshing compared to last year being like, "Well, we weren't playing together, doing fart noises with his mouth," like, there's a huge difference of mentality of Brad Underwood and his team. It's such a business-like mentality, for these guys, and it's so nice to see after last year.
I mean, I think if I'm just thinking of this topic right off the top of my head, but if you think back to his decisions this offseason, I think he'll tell you he wishes he brought in a quarter or point guard. Of course, that's obviously still a glaring weakness on this
It's
team.
always great to have a quarterback, though.
Yeah, a quarterback, the offense. That's what I was meaning.
Yes.
But all the other guys, Damask, Guerrier, even Harmon, like
Yep.
he's pretty much hit doubles, if not triples, with those guys. Whether it's on the basketball court or the culture in the locker room. So I think again, Underwood knows right now he has it pretty good. And yeah, he is a man who tends to speak in hyperbole a little bit, but right now I kind of believe him. When he says, this team has as much potential as any team that he's had. I see it this time. So I can understand why he's in a good mood because I think the more I think about it, last year there was struggles, on the court. Yeah, we had a lot of highly rated guys there, but they were young, and we just don't know what this new generation, like what they can and can't handle. Guys you think are Underwood guys ended up not being Underwood guys. I don't think we have that culture issue this year. I don't think we have those locker room issues this year, and so that's why I think Brad is sleeping a lot easier at night this season compared to last season.
I mean, obviously, with an alpha, it's easy to build a team. But you look at Brad Underwood's teams, whenever he's had an alpha, they've done pretty damn well. Io DeSumo, Kofi Coburn, and Terrence Shannon Jr. this year. Last year, first year, he really didn't have an alpha. Coleman Hawkins wasn't ready because he was behind Io and Kofi in the pecking order of things. And with Terrence Shannon Jr., it's tough being the new guy and starting to order people around. So I think having that alpha is going to be the foundation of Brad Underwood teams, and I think that continues next year with even as a freshman with like a guy like Morez Johnson, like just a highly rated guy and a guy that you definitely should build around, and then you just keep getting those doubles and triples around them, and that's how you build winning basketball. Feels like with Brad Underwood.
Yeah, you figure Morez paired with, I hope Amani plays a little bit more, later on in the season. Just I think, especially with big guys in the Big Ten, it's all about
Yeah.
strength and conditioning. So they just got to get bigger. But our next year's team is going to have a pretty decent front court, both size and talent wise. And you hope a guy like Gibbs Lawhorn sticks around, and he can kind of step into a more prominent scoring role on next year's team. But I mean, let's be honest this year. It's kind of fruitless to talk about what next year's team is going to look like because obviously, I think we've seen that Underwood, for the most part, is content that two or three guys that are going to be on next year's team, you and I are watching on ESPN on a random Wednesday night, and we don't even know it. It's going to be a transfer that's brought in, especially if this whole chemistry works and continues to work. If you're Underwood, why stray from it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just watch the Missouri Valley. You might get one of the guys right.
Yeah. Note who wins Player of the Year and see what number he is.
Absolutely. So let's get a score prediction for Illinois, Missouri. Sonny, go ahead.
I'm going to say a nice, I don't know why I'm saying this, but 77-55. Illinois wins. A good all around team effort. This team's ready. They're not afraid. They've played in much more intense situations already this season. I think Brad knows he's got to win this game. He's done great for us otherwise, but he's struggled in this bragging rights game, and he's going to have the team roster ready. I think we're a 12 to 15 point difference just talent wise, but I think with these extra intangibles about Brad knowing how big of a game this is, I think we win this by 20 plus.
Yeah, I have 82 to 71. I feel like garbage time Missouri will show up later on, but I feel like Terrence Shannon Jr. and Coleman Hawkins and Dane Danger remember what happened last year where they got embarrassed, and I don't think they want to be embarrassed again. I think pride is so big for those three guys in particular with how some of those losses happened last year, regardless if it was against Missouri or in the NCAA tournament. I think their memory runs deep in the best possible way where they will not get embarrassed by even a Tennessee or a Marquette with a Tyler Kolek. I think they are going to have that revenge style of play this year and really make Missouri pay for what they did last year.
I hope you're right. A big win Friday night. I assume we take care of Fairleigh Dickinson, and then we have Northwestern and Purdue coming up pretty early in our conference schedule. Two of the better teams. Well, one of the better teams in the conference and one of the better teams in the nation, if not the best team. So you want our confidence to be sky high going into that game because it's going to be a challenge.
Sonny, I want to thank you for hanging out. This has been the Illini Cast, hosted by Sonny Verma and Austin Berkland as part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. Sonny, thank you, and
Thank
happy
you, guys.
holidays.
Take care.